Atlantis, a mythical island state, a legendary empire that once ruled the Mediterranean and perhaps even the entire world. It was home to an extraordinarily advanced civilization whose technology and knowledge continue to fascinate us to this day. And yet, it vanished, supposedly destroyed by a colossal natural disaster that wiped it from the face of the earth. According to Plato, Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules and disappeared around 10,000 years ago. For centuries, the world has been searching for it, but no one has ever found a single stone of its ruins. We've all heard of Atlantis, but how much do we really know? The information provided by so-called independent researchers is nothing but guesses, assumptions, and speculation, theories built on fragments and scattered clues. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if the reality is far darker? Today, we bring you something never seen before, a study that was meant to remain forever classified. This research wasn't conducted by independent historians or curious archaeologists, but by first Germany and later the Soviet KGB. Yes, the KGB collected evidence that was meant to stay hidden from the public eyes, and what they discovered changes everything we thought we knew about Atlantis. According to a top-secret KGB report from 1983, Atlantis was nothing like Plato described. Forget about the Minoan civilization of Crete or Santorini, wiped out by a volcanic eruption. Atlantis was not a simple advanced culture with flushing toilets. No, according to these secret Soviet records, Atlantis existed not 10,000 years ago, but 1 million years ago. And here's the most shocking part. Atlanteans were not human as we know it. They reportedly stood 2.5 meters tall, that's over 8 feet tall, and lived up to 300 years and possessed technologies that surpass even our wildest modern inventions. They could fly through the air, wield weapons of mass destruction, and their scientific knowledge was beyond anything we can comprehend. But it gets even more unsettling. It wasn't a natural disaster that wiped them out. They destroyed themselves. Atlantis didn't sink beneath the waves because of a volcano or a tsunami. It was war. A war so cataclysmic that their entire civilization was erased from existence. So why haven't you heard this before? Why did the Secret Service hide this information from us? What the KGB knows was never meant to be revealed to the public. But now you know. Stay tuned. What we are about to reveal will change the way you see history and challenge everything you believe about human civilization. This is the story that was never meant to be told. Welcome to Mysteries and Facts, the place where the line between reality and fiction fades away. We bring you gripping stories of conspiracies, unsolved mysteries, and hidden secrets. From the possible to the seemingly impossible, here we unveil the truths that were never meant to be revealed. We're in Athens. The year is 360 BC. 40 years have passed since Athens, once the crown jewel of Greek city-states, fell to its knees. Surrounded, starved, and defeated, the city was forced to surrender in the brutal Peloponnesian War. The cost of that war was more than just military defeat. It shattered the pride and the power of one of the most influential city-states in the ancient world. After the fall, a new regime known as the 30 Tyrants seized control of the city. Ruthless and oppressive, their rule was marked by fear and bloodshed. Among these tyrants were Critias, a cousin of Plato's mother, and Charmides, Plato's own uncle. Their reign, however, was short-lived. The people of Athens rose up, overthrew the tyrants, and reclaimed their democracy. Critias and Charmides were both killed in the revolt. These events left a permanent mark on Plato. A fierce critic of democracy, he devoted his life to the pursuit of truth, justice, and the search for the ideal state. But unlike the rebels who took up swords, Plato took up a pen. He founded the Academy, a place where knowledge reigned supreme and young minds were shaped to question, reason, and seek wisdom. Now it's the year 360 BC. Plato is 67 years old. From within the quiet courtyards of his academy, he is hard at work on two of his most famous and enduring dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. It is in these texts that he tells a story that will echo through history, the story of Atlantis. Plato's pen is moving, and history will never be the same.
For at that time the sea was passable, for it had an island before its mouth, which you call in your speech the Pillars of Heracles. That island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and on that Atlantic island there arose a great and extraordinary royal power, ruling over the whole of that island and over many other islands and parts of the mainland, besides which, on this side towards us, they ruled over Libya as far as Egypt, and over Europe as far as Tyrrhenia.
You've just heard an excerpt from Timaeus. In it, an Egyptian priest from the temple of the goddess Neith reveals a secret to Solon, the story of Atlantis. But who was Solon, and why is he so significant? Solon was no ordinary figure in Greek history. He was a renowned poet, a sacred lawgiver, and one of Athens' most influential leaders. Elected as Archon, the city's ruler, he drafted a new democratic constitution for Athens, which came into force in 594 BC. But before this monumental achievement, Solon traveled far and wide. He visited Cyprus and, most importantly, Egypt. During his time in Egypt, he journeyed to the city of Sais, then the capital of Egypt, where he met with the priests of an ancient temple dedicated to the goddess Neith. It was here that one of the priests told him the story of Atlantis, the very story you just heard. But there's a catch. By the time Plato wrote down this story, Solon had already been dead for over 200 years. So how reliable is this dialogue? Did it truly happen, or is it a work of fiction? Here's where it gets interesting. Plato may have had access to Solon's original account in a way no one else could. Why? Because Plato was a descendant of Solon himself. Solon, born into a once wealthy aristocratic family, was one of Plato's ancestors. This raises a compelling possibility. Could the story of Atlantis have been passed down orally within Plato's family for generations until it finally reached Plato himself, the one who decided to immortalize it in writing? How credible is Plato's story of Atlantis? At the very least, the name Atlantis itself raises questions. It's derived from Atlas, the eldest son of Poseidon, the god of the sea. The entire story of Atlantis is woven with threads of Greek mythology. But here's the critical point. Could Greek mythology have existed thousands of years before Greece itself? The details of Atlantis are revealed in Critias, one of Plato's famous dialogues. According to this account, Atlantis was ruled by 10 kings, 5 pairs of twins, half human, half divine, all of them children of Poseidon, and a mortal woman named Plato. The most important of these kings was Atlas, the firstborn of the eldest twins, who ruled from a magnificent royal palace. Plato described Atlantis as a landmass the size of Libya and Asia Minor combined, with a vast, elongated plain measuring 555 kilometers in length and 370 kilometers in width. The northern part of the island was mountainous, while the central plain was fertile, densely populated, and so agriculturally rich that it yielded 2 harvests each year. At the heart of this great civilization was a capital city, A stunning metropolis adorned with awe-inspiring architecture, majestic buildings, grand temples topped with circular domes, and an intricate system of infrastructure filled the cityscape. At its center stood the royal palace, encircled by a wall of gold. The most sacred site in the city was the Temple of Poseidon and Plato, an architectural marvel coated in silver with golden pinnacles. Its ceiling was adorned with ivory, gold, and silver inlays, and inside stood a colossal statue of Poseidon, riding a chariot pulled by 6 winged horses, all made of pure gold. But that wasn't the only relic of importance. Deep within the temple was a bronze tablet bearing the divine laws of Poseidon himself. These laws played a key role in a sacred ritual held every 5th and 6th year. The 10 kings of Atlantis would gather in the temple, offer prayers, and partake in an ancient rite. Their task was to hunt a bull roaming freely within the temple, but they were forbidden to use weapons. Once the bull was captured, they laid it on the sacred bronze tablet, sacrificed it, and allowed its blood to flow over the inscribed laws. The kingly council then burned parts of the bull as an offering to the gods, mixed the bull's blood with wine, and drank it together as a symbol of their vow to uphold the divine laws of Poseidon. But the city's grandeur didn't end there. The central temple hill was surrounded by 3 circular water canals, separated by rings of land connected by bridges. A large canal led from the sea directly into the city, allowing ships to sail into its very heart. Atlantis was a maritime superpower, boasting 3 bustling harbors and a thriving trade network. The city's buildings were constructed using blocks of white, black, and red stone, which gave it a unique, colorful aesthetic. The homes of the wealthy elite were embellished with precious metals like gold and silver, underscoring their high status. But Atlantis didn't just build. It mined and forged. The island was rich in resources, from iron, gold, and silver to other precious metals. But perhaps the most mysterious of all was a legendary alloy known as orichalcum, a metal said to be more valuable than gold. But the rise of Atlantis was met with its fall. Power bred ambition, and the Atlanteans, driven by greed and pride, launched a military campaign against the Mediterranean states, Egypt, and Proto-Athens. Their ambition would be their undoing. The brave Greeks triumphed, repelling the Atlantean forces. Defeated, the people of Atlantis experienced a moral collapse. Greed, vanity, and lawlessness took root, and they turned away from the divine laws of Poseidon. This angered the gods. Their punishment was swift and catastrophic. One terrible night, Atlantis was struck by a cataclysm of fire and earthquakes. The entire island sank beneath the waves, vanishing into the depths of the sea. Atlantis vanishes as suddenly and mysteriously as Plato's unfinished dialogue Critias. The final line reads, "Having gathered all the gods into their most sacred dwelling place, which stands at the center of the universe, and from which one can oversee all that has come into being, he spoke, but what did he say? What words did Zeus, the king of the gods, have for the assembled deities? We will never know, because the text abruptly ends. Was it intentional? Was Plato challenging us to reflect, to fill in the sentence with our own thoughts? If so, his plan succeeded. For over 2,000 years, people have pondered this story, searching for meaning in both the missing words and the mystery of Atlantis. Even Plato's closest disciple, Aristotle, believed his teacher had invented the tale to serve as a philosophical allegory. But not everyone agreed. Crantor, an early commentator on Plato's works, argued that Atlantis was a real place, He even traveled to Egypt in search of proof. There, he claimed to have seen hieroglyphs inscribed on the pillar of the Temple of Neith, which, according to him, confirmed Plato's story. The fascination didn't stop there. In the 1st century, the philosopher Philo of Alexandria wrote about Atlantis. In the 5th century, Proclus Lycius mentioned it again. Then came the 16th century, and with it, a new and radical idea. Francisco López de Gomara, a Spanish historian, proposed that Plato had actually been talking about the Americas. He argued that the newly discovered continent was larger than Africa and Asia combined, and pointed out that the Aztecs used the word atl to refer to water, a name he claimed must have been inherited from the memory of a sunken ancient capital. Not long after, in 1596, a Flemish cartographer, Abraham Ortelius, took the theory one step further. In his book Thesaurus Geographicus, he suggested that the continents of America, Europe, and Africa were once physically connected, but had since drifted apart. For Ortelius, Atlantis hadn't sunk at all. It had split away from the other continents. By the 17th century, even the great thinker Sir Francis Bacon joined the discussion. In his posthumously published work, The New Atlantis, Bacon proposed that the ruins of the Mayan and Aztec civilizations were, in fact, the remnants of Atlantis itself. The obsession with Atlantis reached new heights in the late 19th century, thanks to an unlikely figure, Ignatius Loyola Donnelly, a populist politician and self-proclaimed scientist. In his 1882 book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, Donnelly introduced a groundbreaking theory. According to him, every ancient civilization, from Egypt to the Americas, was descended from the lost super-civilization of Atlantis. It was, in his view, the most technologically advanced society of its time. And what destroyed it? The Great Flood mentioned in the Bible. Donnelly believed Atlantis wasn't in the Americas, but at the heart of the Atlantic Ocean. His book sparked a global obsession, but just 6 years later, the world was shaken again. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a Russian aristocrat, philosopher, and the founder of Theosophy, introduced a new and even more shocking idea. In 1888, a book unlike any other was published, The Secret Doctrine. Its author was one of the most controversial figures of her time, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a woman who claimed to possess extraordinary psychic powers. She didn't just talk about it. She claimed to practice telepathy, levitation, and even materialization of objects. And where did she learn these abilities? According to her, she was taught by mysterious masters in Tibet. Her most audacious claims came in the 2nd volume of The Secret Doctrine, titled Anthropogenesis. Here, she presented a radical new theory on the evolution of humanity, tracing it back millions of years. Blavatsky proposed that human beings evolved in stages, each stage marked by the rise of a root race. The 4th of these root races, she claimed, had its origins in Atlantis. According to Blavatsky, the Atlanteans were not just another ancient civilization. Their society had reached its peak around 1 million years ago, long before any known human civilization. But their technological and spiritual advancements led to their downfall. Blavatsky argued that the Atlanteans had mastered supernatural powers far beyond our comprehension, powers that eventually became their undoing. Their civilization was consumed by internal war, a conflict triggered by the reckless and dangerous misuse of these extraordinary abilities. Where did Blavatsky get this knowledge? Her explanation was just as mystifying as the story itself. She claimed that during her deep trances, she entered a state of telepathic communication with the Mahatmas of Tibet. But Blavatsky's theories didn't just inspire mystics and visionaries. They also laid the foundation for one of the most dangerous ideologies of the 20th century, Her concept of root races was appropriated as a mythological justification for the theory of Aryan race supremacy. Suddenly, the Atlanteans were no longer a mystical civilization lost between the waves. They became something far more sinister. The Atlanteans transformed into Hyperboreans, a race of Nordic supermen. In 1922, Carl Georg Zitteich took it even further. In his book Atlantis, the original homeland of the Aryans, he claimed that the Atlanteans were not only Aryans, but also descendants of the Norse gods Wodan, Thor, and Freya. According to Zitteich, Wodan, Thor, and Freya were the father, Adam, and Eve of humanity. Their descendants allegedly founded the great ancient civilization of the world, from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Athens to the early cultures of South America. Zitteich even pinpointed the location of Atlantis near the Azores Islands. This idea evolved further under the influence of Hermann Wirth, who introduced the concept of a Nordic Atlantic master race, also called the Aryan Nordic race. This ideology, steeped in myth and pseudoscience, would soon become an integral part of racial doctrine. In 1935, with the full backing of Heinrich Himmler, Richard Walter Dare, and even Adolf Hitler himself, Wirth co-founded the notorious organization known as Ahnenerbe, officially titled the German Ancestral Heritage Society for the Study of Ancestral History. This endeavor became one of the most heavily funded research projects in Germany. It had the full support of Hitler himself and was deemed a national priority. Resources were limitless. Himmler personally envisioned it as a grand, all-encompassing research effort that would produce extraordinary discoveries and overturn the established history of mankind. To achieve this, 7,000 researchers, scientists, and scholars were enlisted to work on this vast undertaking. Specialists in archaeology, anthropology, folklore, history, musicology, philology, biology, zoology, botany, astronomy, and even medicine were recruited. It was, in essence, one of the most ambitious attempts in human history to rewrite the story of our origins. But the story doesn't end there. After Germany's defeat, many of Ahnenerbe's research files fell into the hands of the Soviet KGB. The Soviets recognized their potential value and decided to continue the research in secret. Decades later, in 1983, a classified report known as Project Orion was compiled by the KGB and presented to the Committee for State Security of the USSR. The report's findings were also shared with the Soviet Union's highest authority, General Secretary Yuri Andropov. What exactly the KGB uncovered remains a mystery. Some claim they pursued Ahnenerbe's research to its logical conclusion, while others believe the Soviets discovered something far more profound, a truth so dangerous that it had to be buried even deeper than Atlantis itself. According to a classified KGB report, the Ahnenerbe relied on a wide range of historical sources. One such source, who's said to be the writings of Manetho, a 3rd century BC Egyptian priest and historian. While his work existed in 4 known copies, 2 were lost in the burning of the Library of Alexandria. The other 2, one is rumored to be hidden in the Vatican archives, while the other was supposedly kept in a Tibetan monastery. According to the KGB report, Ernst Schaefer, a leading Ahnenerbe researcher, acquired this lost text directly from the 13th Dalai Lama during his 1938 Tibetan expedition. During a secret tour of the underground chambers of the Potala Palace, The Dalai Lama allowed Schiffer to photograph a mysterious granite slab that depicted the position of the planets 1.5 million years ago. In addition, he received a Sanskrit roll containing an ancient manuscript. The Germans gathered an enormous collection of artifacts, manuscripts, and data, and from this material, they constructed a controversial new theory. According to their research, the ancestors of the Atlanteans were called Myrmidons, and they arrived on Earth some 5 million years ago, settling on a vast island in the Atlantic Ocean. These Myrmidons were described as giants, standing 4 meters or 13 feet tall, with large heads and red, white, or yellow skin. Over the next 2.5 million years, natural evolution gradually reduced their size to about 3 meters or 9.8 feet, giving rise to a race called the Autochthons. These beings allegedly had an average lifespan of 600 years. The Autochthons eventually gave rise to the Atlanteans, the advanced civilization most people know from Plato's writings. The Atlanteans were described as being 2.5 meters or 8.2 feet tall, with an average lifespan of 300 years. But these weren't ordinary people. According to Ahnenerbe's theory, the Atlanteans possessed knowledge granted to them by beings known as the Great Teachers. Their society was rich in technology, wisdom, and mythical power. Their most astonishing achievement? The Vimanas, legendary flying machines that appeared in ancient Indian texts. But these weren't simple flying chariots. The Vimanas were said to be equipped with an advanced energy weapon, a form of high-frequency energy beam that could target and destroy entire cities with a single shot. However, their technological superiority would ultimately be their downfall. Roughly 850,000 years ago, the leaders of Atlantis rebelled against the gods. The cause of this rebellion? It was something seemingly trivial but symbolically significant. The gods had imposed a strict system of base 12 counting and measurements, which did not align with the 5-fingered hands of the Atlanteans, who preferred a base 10 system. The rebellion escalated into a full-blown war. The Atlanteans launched a daring military offensive. Using their Vimanas, they attempted to destroy the divine stronghold of Agartha, a mythical city believed to exist within the Earth's core. The attack triggered a thermonuclear explosion so powerful that it shattered the inner sanctum of Agartha. But the devastation didn't stop there. The force of the blast caused the very foundations of Atlantis to collapse, plunging the entire island into the ocean. But the story doesn't end there. The KGB report hints at an even older timeline. It claims that 450,000 years ago, a powerful deity named Amon arrived on Earth with his 2 sons, Anu and Enki. Together, they established a new ruling order, a civilization known as Anunnaki, described as conquerors who subjugated a portion of humanity. This story aligns with the much-debated theories, including the Sumerian creation texts and the modern ancient astronaut hypothesis. What we've just explored is the KGB's account of Atlantis, not as a myth, but as a part of an ancient secret history. The idea that this story was prepared for the Soviet leadership may seem far-fetched, but it was no ordinary report. It was part of Project Orion, a secret initiative intended to provide insight into the origins of humanity. The conclusions? We may never know for sure, but if this version of history, with its giants, Vimanas, and divine wars, seemed too fantastical to be real, then perhaps that's exactly the point. Atlantis may be the oldest known civilization to have been destroyed, but it might not have been the first. Human history is filled with gaps, sudden stops, and unexplained disappearances. Civilizations have fallen before, and one thing is certain, If another civilization is destined to fall, it will be our own.